Hi, good morning. I was hoping that this would be like mounted, so it wouldn't be like this. So if you see me shaking a little bit, have mercy on me. I know, right? My daughter didn't come. Okay, so sorry. I named this Bethlehem. I actually wrote my actual birth story about 4 years ago on my blog, and that's what I'm going to read today. But I wrote a little introduction, so I'll start with that. My daughter didn't come into this world in the most ideal circumstances. I was an unwed, pregnant 20-year-old, living out of my car on and off, dating an abusive guy I let get me pregnant because I cared so little about myself and my life. Mary and I, Jesus' mother, didn't have a great birth plan. Neither of us planned months ahead of time where we were going to deliver. We certainly didn't go visit the facilities. Nowadays, women seem to take this concept to a whole new level, trying to meticulously plan out every detail. The who, the what, the where, the how. The abuse for me hadn't started with my child's father. This unworthiness stemmed from years of abuse from boys and men, which is what led to my reckless behavior. I was on the fast track to utter darkness. I was acting out of who I thought I was. A useless, dirty, unworthy, unlovable, good for nothing, you fill in the blank. It's like the darkness was closing in on me. Little did I know the light of the world was pursuing me all along. Even in our darkest hours, our most ugliest of days, or years for that matter, God saves us from our miry pit. Nothing is too far gone for him. Nothing. Not even my wretchedness, not even yours. If I said I had a complicated, painful, unpredictable, abusive past, it would still be an understatement. I have a pretty traumatic birth story, the birth of my daughter, that is, and it still couldn't compare to Mary's. This morning I wanted to take the time to share that with all of you. I was 20 years old and it was 4:30 a.m. My father's child was still drunk from the night before, even after I begged and pleaded with him to not drink an ounce because I knew I had been in labor that morning. The contractions were 10 to 15 minutes apart all day, and we had actually been at a wedding earlier, and I was singing The Rose at the ceremony by Bette Midler. But remember, this was like late 1994, so. My mom was out of town. My best friend was nowhere to be found. My sister was telling me it probably isn't time, you're overdramatic, go back to bed. But I had to go. I had to move. You know what I'm talking about if you've ever been in labor. It had been 16 hours or so of mild labor. But when I was needing to move, the contractions were about 2 to 3 minutes apart. I had to drag my child's father out of bed, and when I say drag, I mean it. There are many things I now know I would do differently, and one of them would be to leave him in bed. After splashing water on his face, he finally woke up, and without grabbing a thing, we didn't have a bag packed, by the way, we headed out the door. All the while, I'm holding onto my belly because I was in so much pain. I had to be the driver. You heard that right. I drove myself to the hospital in labor. With contractions 2 to maybe 3 minutes apart still. As I pulled out of our parking lot of our apartment building, I felt and heard someone pound on my car. I slammed on my brakes, got out of the car with some guy yelling at me. "What do you think you're doing? You almost hit me, B." Then my child's father runs over to the guy and starts pouncing on him, and they proceed to get in a brawl, and someone's head ends up on the concrete garage wall, while me and the guy's girlfriend are screaming, "Stop. I'm in labor. She's in labor. Can't you see? Stop." As I'm literally bent over in the worst possible pain of my life. We drove away with my my child's father having a black eye and scratches all over his face. Down the interstate I go, driving 80 miles per hour while the contractions ease up. I drop it back down to 25 miles per hour while the contractions come on strong. And there were moments where I missed the gas pedal altogether. What was normally a 25-minute drive took me over an hour. When we arrive at the hospital, not my perfectly planned out birthplace, the first thing the nurses do is tend to my child's father's messed up face. I stood there, knelt over. It's like the third time I'm knelt over, thinking I say, this has got to be a joke. I finally made it to my room, and needless to say, my child's father passed out for the remainder of the birth experience, which was a good thing. My mom arrived within 20 minutes before my daughter was born. My dad was there talking about the weather and how cold it was. It was 12 below, January 15th. And my sister was by my side. And a healthy 8-pound, 3-ounce, 21 inches long baby girl was born. I'm not sure how much Jesus weighed.
I'm not sure what.
But all this mess could never compare to the experience of Mary while in labor. As awful and traumatic as my experience was, I can't imagine being on a donkey in labor, experiencing such excruciating pain, fatigued, being beyond frustrated, hot, sticky, climbing all those hills, and how exhausted she must have been. And that's, I'm sure, putting it mildly, not the most perfect of circumstances. Tradition tells us that the night Jesus was born, it was really cold. But I've learned differently. I've come to learn that the month probably wasn't December when we celebrate Christmas, but most likely June. And it was probably actually really hot. Again, how uncomfortable. Even 2 dark and gritty nights could not stop 2 babies from being born hours later. Nor can any of our darkness stop God from wanting to be in our lives. Jesus nor my daughter were born in the prettiest or most ideal situations, but what emerged from the most bleak, scary, uncertain times, dark times, was light. Jesus is the light of the world. He's a savior. He came to save, to actually save. Hearing that he's our savior can become numbing after a while. We hear it again and again, and we can become desensitized by it. But as you can tell by my story, I certainly needed a lot of saving. So in typical Gina fashion, the way I learn is by knowing what something means exactly. So when I became a Christian, I had to find out, I looked at the literal definition of save, which is rescuing. It's just like somebody drowning in an ocean and the lifeguard runs out passionately to go save that person. Jesus does the same thing. He's in the rescuing business, and not just from eternal separation, but from our own darkness. He saves us from ourselves. Daily. The light of the world makes it personal with us, and no darkness is too dark for his light to shine in. Jesus is the dark, saving, human rescuer, light installer of our lives. Our circumstances, much like mine and Mary's birth stories, don't have to be untroubled, pain-free, or happy for beauty to be birthed. We can be hot, bothered, irritated, miserable, angry, confused, lost, and still find light. Psalm 139:12 proves just how much of our darkness God can handle. Even the darkness will not be dark to you. The night will shine like the day. The darkness is light to you. So our darkness of dark is light to God. He can handle even the most scandalous of nights. He could handle mine. If you think you have or have had too much darkness in your life, remember, dark is light for the light of the world. Thank you.